Hi, I'm Anne-Marie Mediwake, and I'm here with Lindsey Deluce and Kelsey McEwen. Welcome to CTV Your Morning, the podcast.
This week, we look at how obsessing over getting enough sleep could really end up doing more harm than good. And a man from Toronto has spent the last 13 years in jail for a crime he says he never committed. We'll talk with investigative journalist Kevin Donovan about the story and what he's learned.
Thanks for joining us today, and remember to start your day with us live weekdays from 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern, 7 to 10 a.m. Atlantic on CTV CTV News Channel, and on your CTV News app.
Hiring the wrong contractor can cost you big time.
According to the Better Business Bureau, home renovation scams are happening more often and costing victims more money. But there are some red flags that you can spot early.
So we brought on builder and reno expert Ryan Thompson to outline what to watch out for.
First of all, before we get to how to prevent yourself, what are the most common home improvement scams that are being hit by people?
So I would say there's probably two big ones. One surrounds aggressive contractors. So, people who are targeted, they're not even really looking for any renovation work, but they're being targeted and pursued by scammers. So that's a big one, right?
Okay.
Another one surrounds deposit structure. So people who are asking for very large deposits up front with no intention of actually doing the work. And once they have that cash, they're gone.
Well, and then the pressure comes in because you sort of brought them in and they're like, well, then we're just going to leave. And then you think, well, I have to start the process all over again.
Yeah.
What is the first step in finding a reputable contractor? How do you tell the difference?
So there's a couple different ways. One that I always recommend is just word of mouth. So if you have a neighbor, a friend, family member, somebody who's used a contractor, talk to them. Say, hey, do you know anybody who can do this? Let me see their work. That's always a good kind of safe bet. Another one is, if you see contractors doing work in your neighborhood, observe them. Right? You see somebody doing a roof, watch them, see how long it's taken them, how they operate, how their crew operates. Take advantage of those opportunities to watch people doing work in your neighborhood.
Now, because I am not an expert, which is why I'm reaching out to a contractor in the first place to hire somebody, I don't know even what qualifications I should be looking for. So help me out here.
Yeah, so myself as a builder, I'm a part of various local, provincial, and national associations. So everybody's going to have those in their community, and that can kind of be a good way to start.
What are some of the names of the ones that I should be looking for?
So for me, there's Build GTA, which is a local one, and then there's the Ontario Home Builders Association, and then nationally there's the Canadian Home Builders Association. So I'm a part of all of those. But if you're looking for somebody who's maybe doing some plumbing work, they may not be a part of those, but there could be some local trade association that they are a part of.
What should payments look like when it comes to deposit? You said, be very wary of people who want large deposits of money up front. But if you've never done a renovation before, what's large, what's normal?
Yeah, so I think we have a couple examples here that we can kind of walk through. The first being if somebody was going to do this $10,000 fence job, right? This is an example of one. So $10,000 due when, you sign up with the contractor. And the reason for that is, you have to recognize too that contractors do have a schedule. They don't want to commit to a larger $10,000 job if they're not getting something. So a $10,000 deposit
or
in
10%.
this 10% deposit in this scenario is normal. And then when they show up with the materials, you see them on site, they're going to want their 40% of that total due. And then it's about a 3-day job. That remaining 50% is going to be due upon completion.
Should that be in writing, or is that like a verbal contract you make?
That is in writing. That is in writing. You obviously always want to have these in writing. When it's verbal over the phone, you could get lost in translation. So email, text, some form of writing is going to be what you want.
What do you suggest paying with a credit card? Why do you think that that's the best option?
So it's not always going to be an option, but there will be such situations where a contractor will accept a credit card payment. So if they do, take advantage of that, because what can happen is if they don't complete the work or they stop halfway or something like that, you have recourse with the credit card company, right? The thing to just be mindful of is when you're paying contractors with a credit card, normally they're going to add maybe 3 to 4% to just cover some of the fees associated. They're not scamming you. That's kind of normal practice in the industry.
That's good to know.
So just know that. And that can provide some recourse if something does go wrong. So
Any other steps that you would advise people doing to make sure they get a reputable contractor?
Yeah, a big one is to just simply Google the person's name or company. You'd be surprised how many of these companies, you just do a simple Google search, there's a news story about with a homeowner saying, these guys scammed me, or there's Google reviews or other reviews online. That's a step that people should always take because a lot of times the information is out there and they just forgot to Google it.
You guys know that we had a really bad renovation experience. It's sometimes even hard to talk about because it's your home, it's your money, and it leaves you with this really terrible feeling, which is why I'm really glad we had this conversation with Ryan about what to look for ahead of time, because we were the family that we knew people who'd renovated. We had a recommendation. I work in this industry where that there's bad guys and good guys, and we thought we'd hire a good team.
Looking back, were there red flags for you guys?
There were red flags, but again, we had never done a renovation before, and we are not handy people, which is why we hired people to renovate for us. So I guess what we didn't know is what was normal or things that felt off to us. Is it just part of the process, or is it really not great? And what I wish that we had done is there was a point in our renovation where I remember Daryl and I looking at each other and said, do we just pull the plug and get them out of our house and try to find somebody new? And we didn't, because we were already so far in and we were supposedly only a few weeks out. And it was so bad that I almost couldn't deep clean my house for a year, because every time I would go in somewhere, I'd see something else that was poorly done, and it would just make me feel crappy all over again.
Yeah, I know. So my husband's a contractor, Drew's a contractor, and has been in this business for 20 plus years. So I do want to say, and Ryan and I talk about this whenever he's here, there are fantastic contractors out there. There's this very small percentage of people that, take advantage of their clients, which is so sad to hear. There was a story out of Toronto recently where this couple handed over $480,000, $500,000 to a contractor who basically just walked away and didn't do the job and actually made things worse. And I was really happy that they came forward, because they said, the hardest part for us is I'm so embarrassed.
Yeah.
So embarrassed. There's a lot of shame here, but I wanted to share my story. But again, that type of scam is such a small percentage. So doing the things that Ryan mentioned, just doing, and honestly, a Google search or something as simple as that, or going to see a renovation that had been completed and talking to the people that had it done. One of the things Drew has done in the past, which maybe would be of interest to people, so you hire a contracting company, but you can also hire a consultant. Drew has done this before, where he is the consultant on a project. So that he can, so the client, has hired a company, and then so Drew will look over any notes or emails that have been sent to in between the two groups. Yeah, so he'll say, yes, that's legit. This is something to flag or whatever.
See, that's the voice that was missing for us.
You just needed something else.
It's almost like a project manager. You get a coordinator of some sort. You get why a role like that can exist. I think the other thing too is, if you've never done something like this before, is talking to multiple different contractors. Know that in our case, we so often do things on our own, and Jay's very, very handy and is able to do things like that. But when we've hired, we talk to multiple different people to get differing opinions, because so often, and we see this time and time again, if it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. And so you're following that. But I think, Anne-Marie, I always think of you guys, and the important takeaway is this can happen to anybody, and there's no shame in it, and it happens, and it's awful, but it's not your fault. There's no blame there.
Yeah.
I know.
I still have stairs that aren't to code, but hopefully we'll get a chance to fix that someday.
I'm going to give you Jay for a day, and he's going to come and do all those things for you.
Jay and Drew. We'll get the team in.
Oh, Joe, you're going to make me cry.
Your house does look beautiful, though, I must say, from the pictures that I've seen.
Well, that's some good styling on my part.
True.
Well, we all want better sleep, and honestly, we'll try just about anything to get it.
Yeah, we'll also pay a lot of money. The global sleep aid market is expected to hit $168 billion in the next 2 years.
But here's the twist. Obsessing over sleep might actually make your night worse. Sleep expert Amanda Jewson explains why.
I think there's a lot of people who are at home right now thinking, yes, I do stress about my sleep.
Yes.
So why are we obsessed with getting perfect sleep?
I mean, last night I opened my TikTok and the very first thing I see is something about sleep maxing. How do you maximize on your sleep? Are you taping your mouth? Are you going to bed at certain times? You got people wrapping up their whole heads. There's a whole culture about, the more we're sleeping, the better, the more nutrition we have, the better we are, the more functional we are. There's a lot of pressure out there, and we buy these things. You know, I wear a wearable, but I do not wear it to sleep because it doesn't make me feel good. But these functions come with it, and it's sort of telling us, hey, you should be paying attention to this. This is a problem. It will help you when you maximize on it.
If I have learned anything from and I do this very liberally, wellness industry, it's that if someone's telling you to obsess about something, it's probably because they're making money off of your obsession.
100%.
So you've found some research that points to sleep satisfaction and how it can be more useful than how many hours we get. So what does this mean? Break this down for us.
So the study looked at 109 university students, and I love when a study about sleep looks at university students and new parents, because you know it's the real deal. But they looked at 109 university students, and these students took notes on their sleep. So they wrote down how they felt throughout the day, and so part of it was looking at their self-reported data. So I feel good. The other part is that they wore a wearable to sleep. And quite often what this study found is the wearable data did not necessarily correlate with their self-reported data. So, you know, the wearable said, oh, you had a bad night of sleep, and they might wake up and say, actually, I felt great. And so what's really interesting about that is, we know that these trackers and these wearables, they're not exactly accurate to begin with. So it can be helpful in creating a baseline about your sleep. But as I say all of the time on this show, focus on how you feel in the morning. We have this whole mechanism. It's called how we feel, how rested we are. Are you napping during the day? Are you sleepy? Truly sleepy? Like, are you eyes closing? Now listen, I am a great sleeper. I had a bad night of sleep last night. I know that. I don't need this to tell me, and that is more accurate, and it has a better predictor of your well-being the next day.
Okay, so what does sleep satisfaction look like? How do we get there?
Truly, that's such a great question. I think sleep satisfaction comes from focusing on relying on our own reported data, right? How we feel. Really, if we can, try to separate from what the wearable is telling you and ask yourself, how do I actually feel? And I really encourage my clients, if and when possible, try to play around with some flexibility in your sleep, meaning that, I know this is controversial, go to bed when you feel sleepy, go to bed when you're tired, get out of bed when you feel rested, and stop, if possible, don't ruminate on what the data and the tracker is telling you. We have people who, in the study, they might have 7.5 hours of sleep and report, I didn't feel great. Or the opposite, right? Where they get a certain amount of sleep or they have less and they feel awesome. I have clients all the time come to me saying, I only get 6 hours of sleep, but I feel like $1 million. There's the answer to your question.
Okay, so can we hack this a little bit? Can you reverse psychology and be like, I'm gonna fake it till I make it, and I'm gonna say I had a great night's sleep? Does that play into your perception of how you feel as well?
I think that, listen, how you feel, I think, should be the first thing that you work on. I mean, there is a little bit of manifestation, fake it till you make it, for sure. But I think the body is really great at telling a story, okay? If you have sleep apnea, for example, some wearables can help you detect that. Wearables aren't that bad. If you think that you have a sleep disorder, this can be the very first step in creating a baseline that you bring to your doctor. I think that these do have a functionality, but I don't know. I think your body tells you if you're not sleeping.
They're not the be-all to end-all.
They really are not.
No. So the whole time I was talking with Amanda, Lindsay, I was thinking about you.
I bet.
Because for people who don't know, you had a ring that was tracking your sleep. And I remember you would come into the studio and you would be like, I feel like I had a great sleep. This was awesome. And then you'd look at your data and your data would tell you that, in fact, you had the worst sleep of your life. And it would hit, you'd sit there and you'd be like, and frustrated by it.
I feel like it was a little bit of the reverse, because remember, I got the ring because I said, I'm waking up, like I know I'm having a crappy sleep. I know this. So then I got the ring to prove to myself that I was not.
To validate it.
Yeah. You went to investigate.
I did. I wanted the data, and we talked, I would come in with my data, right?
Yeah.
And I, in fact, was having terrible sleeping. Like, I was waking up, I still am, like 15 to 20 times a night. And my ring was tracking that and able, so you could see the number of times I was waking up during the night, which is, I mean, I have so many theories about this. I've been working this shift, these hours, like waking up at 3, whatever in the morning, for 15, 16 years, maybe. Wow. I know. I mean, you guys have been doing this for what? Yeah, I mean, you have too, Kels. Like, how many years?
Yeah, about the same.
Yeah. So I think my theory is that my body doesn't really allow itself to get into a deep sleep because I'm always in a state of ready to wake up.
Oh, interesting.
So can I ask
my
you,
theory.
So then having this data, then was it helpful, or
Yeah.
did it give you
me.
tools to be able to fix it?
Yeah, well, what I started to do, I was using the data as data points to determine what kind of lifestyle changes I could make. For example, like if I had meat past 6 p.m., what would that do to my sleep? If I worked out during the day, what would that do to my sleep? If I had a glass of wine, what would that do to my sleep? So I was able to do that kind of tracking. So that did help me a little bit. Also, I am a data-driven person, like numbers, data lists, all of that. So I think because I felt like I was like screaming into the wind saying, I'm not sleeping very well. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? But now I had actual concrete evidence saying, okay, yes, you are not sleeping. And I talked to my doctor about it too.
Yeah.
Right? So I was saying, look, I'm tracking my sleep right now and I am having I'm awake, I'm waking up. Now that doesn't mean like I'm getting out of bed and I'm walking around. It just means that I'm, basically opening my eyes, moving around a lot. So for me, it was very helpful. I know other people, they don't want to see that. So for me, I just was like, I had the data, so then I could say, okay, I just felt better about, or if I had, 5 hours of sleep that night, I would come in, to your point, Kels, off the top and say, guys, I had 5 hours.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
I'm
you could look
okay.
at what you did to get the 5 hours.
That's right. So for me, it was very helpful. And I know, but for other people, it's like the reverse. They don't want to know that because they wake up and they're like, oh, I had a good sleep. And then they look at their information and be like, oh, I didn't. I actually felt that it was helpful.
You're listening to Your Morning, the podcast, where we bring you some of our best conversations from the show every week. Join us live on CTV every weekday, 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern, 7 to 10 a.m. Atlantic on CTV CTV News Channel and on your CTV News app.
It is a buyer's market right now. In the first quarter of this year, the National Housing Affordability Measure dropped to 55.1%. This means housing is more affordable compared to just 3 years ago. But from interest rates to amortization, understanding your mortgage can feel like trying to solve a math problem without the answer key. So today, we are breaking it all down. No jargon, no confusion, just real numbers that can save you real money. Joining us this morning is mortgage broker Mary Sales. It's great to have you back on the show.
Thanks. Good to be back.
Okay, so what common issues are you seeing when it comes to buyers looking for the absolute lowest rate?
I think first and foremost, it's understanding what type of mortgage you need and what your situation is, because the interest rate varies. If you are buying with less than 20% down, you are going to need to have an insured mortgage. That gives you the lowest rates. So if you're doing a search on the internet, those are the rates for you. And that's where the confusion comes in with my clients, because they call in automatically assuming they can get the lowest possible rate. But that's not the case. If you're buying with 20% or more down, your rates are higher. In some cases, if you're doing a 30-year amortization as opposed to 25-year, your rates are higher. So it really does depend on the situation.
Yeah, that's where it's so helpful to have somebody like you
Yes.
you can call and be like, Mary, what do I need? What type of mortgage typically includes those lowest rates?
So it would be a default insured mortgage. And it's interesting to note that the insurance is not to protect the borrower. The default insurance is actually to protect the lender from you defaulting on a payment. So you have to get this insurance if you're putting less than 20% down. It does get added to the mortgage amount. You pay for it over the life of the mortgage, but that's where you get the best rates, because from a lender perspective, they're secure. Because if you default, they're just going to file a claim for insurance and get paid out.
That's interesting. I think a lot of people go in thinking that insurance is for that.
Correct. Yeah. They do. They think if they can't make their payment, that the insurance steps in to make the payment, and that's not the case.
No, not at all. How are conventional mortgages different?
So a conventional mortgage doesn't require any insurance, and oftentimes lenders will charge slightly higher interest rates because they see that it's a little bit more risky, just because there isn't that default insurance, and it's for anyone putting 20% or more down. The interesting thing, though, is oftentimes because the mortgage insurance premium is significant, putting 20% down and paying conventional interest rates is actually cheaper on a monthly basis than putting less money down and paying the insurance.
Okay.
So it really is a discussion you need to have with your mortgage professional and work the numbers if you're in a position to put down 20% and if you're not.
Okay, so say you're in a position where you are looking at all of the expenses that you have. You're looking at your mortgage, you're looking at the other debt that you might have accrued, maybe a line of credit or a car or whatever, and now you're wanting to refinance. What are rates looking like for borrowers, that's hard to say, in this position?
Yeah, and that's the thing. So people looking to refinance are also in a different category because sometimes you have default insured mortgages for a purchase. You have a certain set of rates for that. You have a certain set of rates for purchases with a conventional down payment, so 20% or more. And then you have refinance rates. They're usually not too far off from the conventional rates and sometimes can be matched, but a refinance does carry a slightly higher rate. But it really depends on your situation. So if you are in a situation with a lot of debt and you want to roll it all into the equity in the home and just give yourself some breathing room from a cash flow perspective, doing a refinance is actually going to help you a whole lot.
Yeah. When else might someone qualify for a lower rate when they are buying a home?
So if they're buying a home and they're putting a minimum of 35% down, depending on the purchase price and your situation, you may be able to qualify for insured rates. Those ones they call back-end insured rates, back-end insured mortgages, because the lender will pay the insurance premium for you, but you have to put a minimum of 35% down and you have to meet other certain criteria. So then you would get an insured rate, or what they call sometimes an insurable rate.
Okay. There's a lot of information, Mary, that you always bring to the table, and I so appreciate it. I love that I can just throw any question at you, and you're like, I got you, I got you.
Elon Musk's new political party is gearing up for a run in next year's U.S. midterms, but not without some pushback from former allies.
And I think starting a third party just adds to confusion. It really seems to have been developed for two parties. Third parties have never worked. So he can have fun with it, but I think it's ridiculous.
That's President Donald Trump calling Musk's proposed party, quote, ridiculous. Musk announced the America Party over the weekend, writing on X, when it comes to bankrupting our country with waste and graft, we live in a one-party system, not a democracy. For more on Musk's announcement, we're joined by Paul Gardner. He's assistant professor at the Department of Political Studies at Queen's University. Good morning.
Good morning. Hi. Thanks for having me.
So he made the announcement, still lots of questions, including where the America Party is going to stand on certain issues, other than reducing spending. Who is Musk hoping to win over with this third party?
That's an interesting question. That's always a question with third-party candidates, what they're trying to accomplish, both policy-wise and in terms of gaining voters. One possibility is that Elon Musk is actually looking to pull in people who are less likely to vote rather than from one of the two major parties. We're seeing unprecedented political polarization in the United States, entrenchment against one party or another, but there still are a significant number of non-voters that might be the best source of potential voters for a third party.
Well, and the timing of this is interesting as well, right? You have Republicans who are perhaps struggling with how far right the party wants to move. You've got Democrats who are trying to regroup after this last election. So the timing for a third party could make the difference here.
Sure. So right now might be a time where, because of political polarization, there might be room for a party to come in the center. But we've seen these things in history, right? Ross Perot was another candidate who was trying to come in through the center with the idea of reducing things like the deficit, and was rather successful in the 1992 elections, winning up to 20% of the vote. What that didn't translate into was electoral college votes. So it would remain to be seen whether in the midterm elections, someone like Elon Musk would be able to put enough money into back people who could actually win seats rather than just votes.
Yeah, and to President Trump's comments earlier, they haven't been successful anytime. You know, Ross Perot got the closest, but they really haven't been that successful. Musk says this America Party will begin running candidates next year, and he previously said he'd target specific House and Senate races during next November's midterm. So he's got some strategy here. But who is he hoping to pull from? Is it from disgruntled Republicans who feel their party has changed under the MAGA mandate, or Democrats who want to come more to the center?
Yeah, your guess is as good as mine, right? So right now, because the program that Elon Musk has put forward is so uncertain, it's also unclear who he wants to draw from. On the other hand, during his time at Doge, Elon Musk became very unpopular among most Democrats. So it seems like that might be a particularly difficult well to draw from. Again, his best strategy might be to be looking for those people who are low propensity voters, those voters who are less likely to turn out during midterm elections, if he can get them excited. On the other hand, that just means that he's going for the most difficult segment of voters, if that were the case.
Or is this the ultimate revenge? Because third parties are sometimes called spoilers, and the argument here is that third parties pull votes away from a major party. So it's not so much about winning, but who you can make lose. So could the America Party just be a bigger threat to the Republicans or the Democrats? And could this be the ultimate vendetta against President Trump, his former friend?
Yeah, I think you're right. So Elon Musk has always been a bit of a mercurial figure. It certainly could be the case that this is designed as a sort of way to get back at a political rival. But again, the positioning will matter a lot, and it's unclear whether voters will actually see it as beneficial to them strategically to vote for such a party if they know that that's the goal that these politicians have in mind.
Elon Musk, we know for a fact, is the world's richest person. According to Federal Election Commission filings, Musk donated $288 million to support Trump and other Republicans in 2024 alone. So how could Musk's wealth affect the chances of the America Party succeeding? Running a political party takes a lot of money, and Elon Musk has a lot of money.
Yeah, so he has shown an unprecedented willingness to put a lot of money into these races, and $288 million would be a lot for any third party. But we should also remember that the major parties are spending more than $1 billion on individual elections. And so this still would put any third party well behind what political spending is in the United States. Political spending has become a really substantially large industry. So what Elon Musk is putting in could make a difference, especially in targeted races, as you suggested, but it still is a little bit of a drop in the bucket compared to what the major parties are spending.
Remote and hybrid work, we know it's here to stay, but is staying home for work holding your career back?
A new study shows that 40% of Canadians that are working from home are worried that they're being passed over for promotions.
So how do you stay visible and grow your career? Career strategist Chichi Egbo shares some smart advice.
We mentioned there's missed opportunities on promotion, but what are some of the other challenges that people who have chosen to work remotely or a hybrid situation are facing?
Yeah, the first challenge is proximity bias. Is this idea that if you're in office, that means you're more dedicated, you're more engaged, and you're more productive. And in turn, traditional workplaces reward that, right? Mm-hmm. So they reward the person that shows up and they think is the most productive, and they get the career development opportunity. So we're seeing remote workers or hybrid workers sort of lose out on that because this negative connotation that they're not as engaged or they're not as productive or they're too lazy to come into work. So why would we reward them? So that's impacting their career growth, right? And then the second thing is that control. Typically, remote workers, there's more control, or managers want to have more control over their work and their day because, again, they think they're taking naps in the middle of the day, they're running around doing groceries or whatnot. So it's important for remote workers to feel like they still have control over their day. And too many managers are so focused on that green light on the communications team's channel to see, are you online? So that micromanagement, it impacts them completely too as well.
Well, it's been interesting when you're studying this new changing world of work because, yes, that comes directly to a manager, but often that manager is faced with pressure from above. Yeah. That if your employees aren't logging in a certain amount of time, that affects sometimes even your pay scale or bonuses.
Yes.
So there's pressure all around. Some people might say work well in person if you want more opportunities. So why is that just not realistic for everybody in this current era, especially post-pandemic?
Yeah. Post-pandemic, we saw the rise of remote work and hybrid work, which was fantastic because it allowed marginalized groups to show up in their careers in a more impactful way. So one, persons with disabilities, right? They're one of the most underemployed and unemployed group in our country because a lot of workplaces are not accessible, right, in the physical spaces. So if they're able to access remote work and work more meaningfully in a virtual setting in their home where they're comfortable and it's accessible and tailored to their needs, that's going to impact their career growth. So going back into an in-person setting where they are not called for job interviews because of their disabilities perhaps, or the workplaces aren't accessible, that's going to impact them. Secondly, women and caregivers, right? So women are able to balance the home needs and caregiving needs and health needs better when they're remote or hybrid work. IWG did a study on advancing equality in women in hybrid workplaces, and they found more than half the women say remote work allowed them to be more dynamic in their careers and take opportunities, right? So that allows that balance. And sometimes their partner works from home too. So we're able to see that shift and things can be more balanced out and they can pursue career opportunities. And lastly, racialized employees. Although there's still microaggressions we feel even if you're virtual, in a way, when you're working at home, you're sort of limiting that exposure to the microaggressions and the bias and racism in a more in-person setting. And it allows you to focus on your job and not try to navigate that emotional labor when you're in an in-person meeting and you heard someone say something racist or biased, or you just feel left out because you're not invited to the team lunch or you're the only person that looks different, right? So it kind of limits that exposure, allows them to focus on their work when they're able to be at home. So going back to in-person settings is just not realistic and psychologically safe for everyone.
How can you make yourself more visible then? If the studies are showing that, listen, people who are present seem to be getting more of the promotions or more of the opportunities, how do you combat then and still hang on to the benefits of a hybrid or remote situation?
Well, my advice for employees, one, communication is key, right? Communicate often. Communicate to your manager about your goals, your skills, your interests, and use your voice to have those career conversations proactively. And then communication leads to you feeling more comfortable to update your progress on your wins, right? I'm not saying report to your manager all day what you're doing. They don't want that either. They want you to feel like you could work independently, but be strategic with those opportune moments where you can say, hey, I got this win this week. And hey, this is how this project is going, and I think it's going well for these reasons. Or, hey, can I pull you for a chat? I have some ideas, right? I want to brainstorm with you. And we lose those informal brainstorm moments when we are working in a remote setting that you would get in person, right? Where you get to talk to a leader informally, a decision maker, just show up at their desk. So being proactive and communicating and giving progress is important. And then that can lead to finding a mentor and a sponsor, right? It's important to communicate that you want to have a virtual coffee chat with someone who's a decision maker or someone who's on your team you don't talk to often, or another peer on a different team, right? If you can improve how you build relationships and you're communicating often, that can lead into mentorship opportunities. They can see your ideas, your expertise, and hopefully those mentors become sponsors and they say your name when you're not in the room. They advocate for you.
Was Chris Sheriff wrongfully convicted? In August 2009, at a neighborhood barbecue, a gunman shot 3 bullets into Bishan Golub, killing the 34-year-old father. Now, the shooting death led to the arrest of Chris Sheriff, who was sentenced to life behind bars, convicted of first-degree murder. To this day, he claims he never committed the crime. Well, this story caught the attention of Chief Investigative Reporter Kevin Donovan, who has published a written series in the Toronto Star about the story alongside his podcast, Murder on Mount Olive. And Kevin is back in our studio this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Anne-Marie.
So my first question was, of all the people who must reach out to you, wanting to have their cases looked at or re-examined with sort of the Kevin Donovan lens, what was it about this case, his letter to you, that made you pull it out of the stack?
I think it was a very well-written letter. Once I looked at it, he raised a couple of specific issues, some false DNA at his trial. I thought that's something I could check out. He also talked about hearsay evidence used against him, never before used in this way, never used since in a criminal trial in Canada. And then once I finally spoke to him, because I always try and go see a person as soon as possible, in this case in prison, he said to me that he had many opportunities along the way to say he had some accountability. He said, I'm not going to say that because I didn't do it, and that really got to me.
So he was convicted. Police brought forward evidence, and he was convicted based on this evidence. What was it?
Well, the evidence, in my opinion, was very thin, Anne-Marie. They had very little forensics at all. Basically, they knew he was in the area at the time. He had dropped a man off, the man who's believed to be the shooter, and then the man gets back in the car. Car's parked around the corner, so Christopher can't see anything happening. And I've, of course, been to the scene, and I can verify that. So the evidence is basically he was at that place. And there's nothing else to tie him to it. There's no evidence of planning. There's no evidence that he was ganged up, except for this mysterious sources that come forward at the 11th hour.
When Chris wrote to you, he said there were a lot of what he described as wrongdoings at his trial. So what did you find out through your investigation? You mentioned just a few of them.
Yeah, so there's so many of them.
Yeah.
There's so many of them, unfortunately. The police did incorrect transcripts of things he said, brought them forward at the trial. They were never corrected. And so the jury would have thought, well, hang on a second, he said this,
right.
But it turns out, once I look into it, he actually said something completely different. The police brought forward two sources that nobody is allowed to know their identity. Nobody's allowed to cross-examine them. These sources said, literally just before the trial, to a young police officer, yeah, Christopher Sheriff has bodies to his name. He's a gangster. There's nothing in the files of the police force that showed that he had anything to do with gangs. He was a soccer player, quite an accomplished one, about to start work as a carpenter, had a job with a local union. To me, it just doesn't add up, and the smell test is certainly not passed.
We are so glad you joined us today.
For more great conversations, don't forget to download or hit subscribe to Your Morning, the podcast on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
And of course, we would love for you to watch us live weekday mornings on CTV, CTV News Channel, and on your CTV News app. Start your morning with us.